Welcome to the Business Results Program. This is how you can transform yourself, your team, and your whole company. My name is Pete Winiarski. I'm the CEO of Win Enterprises, LLC, and this video is us recording a podcast episode. Podcast Business Results Radio. Look up businessresultsradio.com or go check it out on iTunes or one of the other podcast platforms. And do subscribe and do give a 5-star review. Now, you as a business leader, we get what you're going through. You've got overwhelm and stress and frustration. You have high expectations on your shoulders, some of which you put there yourselves. Why can I say this? Because we, our team, we've experienced this ourselves. We have been business leaders. We know what it's like. And boy, how cool is it that you have this resource. You can listen to this podcast, gain some insights about what you can do differently, gain some ideas, some strategies that you can put in place right away to make your life easier. That's what we're after here. We want your life to be easier because being a business leader does not have to be this challenging, doesn't have to be this hard. And we want you to exceed your expectations, excel, and achieve the results you want, get your team to thrive, and your company to just absolutely go right through the roof. And you can do that here. Enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, Pete Winiarski here. This is Business Results Radio, and this is another interview with an excellent friend of mine who makes excellent decisions. And I'm only going to play with that, Robert, a little tiny bit. But today we're talking about decisions and how to make really good decisions. And Robert's brand, Robert MacPhee, is all about excellent decisions. And Robert, you and I were just joking a moment ago offline before we got on about having people do these really long, extensive bios. And even though I could go on and on about all of your accomplishments, let me start with saying, welcome, Robert MacPhee. How's that?
Awesome. Awesome. Like I said before, I would rather launch right into the conversation than spend time with the stuff that most people really don't care that much about. So yeah. I'm fine with that.
Absolutely. Well, you and I have known each other, and it's interesting because we've traded podcasts here. So we just, it's fresh in our minds now. It's the mirror image of what we did just a few minutes ago where I was a guest on your podcast. And doing the math would take a while. I'd probably need a calculator to figure out how many years it's been. But we actually first met when you were leading the assisting team for Jack Canfield at his Breakthrough to Success. And that was, I actually know the year. So it was 2007. And that was the first time that Marie and I went through that training together. So you were in the Jack Canfield community, and one of the guys that I met as I then got involved to that work and can't shake it, right? It's part of me now.
Yeah, and I think you and I came to that work for the same reason. And the fact that you ended up being part of our volunteer assisting teams, which, we could have a whole separate conversation about that. It actually, that stage of my life where I was leading those teams was probably the most profound leadership experience that I've ever had. And in terms of not having to be working really hard, but doing work that was really important. And a big part of that was selecting people to be part of those teams who I felt were there for all the right reasons. And I always felt like there were 3 reasons why people wanted to do that. One was they wanted a free seminar. That was not what I was looking for. 2 was there were people who wanted to be on the assisting team so they could demonstrate to everyone else in the world that they were already the all-knowing and all-wise being who had all the answers and didn't need to learn anything. They were just there to teach. Right. And that also was not what I was looking for. But the third person, and again, in my experience with you in that environment, you were clearly one of those people, was someone who had gotten so much value from what they had received from the work that they wanted to give back. And I think you would agree. I mean, clearly in my experience with you, that's the way you showed up. You had gotten so much value. And we've talked about how you brought it into your business. I have so much respect for you for not just going and learning something interesting and setting it on a shelf and getting on with your life, but really implementing it into your life and into your business. But we were lucky. We were surrounded by people who were the same way and weren't people who were just looking for a free seminar or trying to demonstrate how smart they were.
Right. And I'll tell you what's really interesting about what you just described is now you've got a whole room of there were 20 or 25 people sometimes of that demographic, right? That group of people who were there for the right reason. They have incorporated these principles into their lives, and we're now finding ways to expand and make other people's lives better. Their clients, their friends, their families. We talked about parenting. All of these things really come together, and that environment is just a game changer that is so difficult to describe to someone who hasn't been through it.
Yeah.
That was my first experience with Robert MacPhee.
Well, I think one of the most amazing things too was we had some truly remarkable people on those teams, people who had accomplished incredible things in their own right, in their business, in their life, just amazing people. And the degree to which those people, because of everything they had received from Jack, were willing to set their ego aside and be the person who was, handing out flyers or setting up the chairs or, greeting people at the door, whatever kind of glamour-free task happened to be on the table. I would look around the room and see, oh my God, look at these people. Like, they're so overqualified for this. There was something really magical about everyone on the team being willing to do that just made it so easy and so effortless.
Right. So what are some highlights, Robert, of your background that, had I been reading a bio that you wanted me to read, what are a couple of things that are important to say?
Well, I think there's a few that I tend to focus on. One is the work that I had the opportunity to work with Jack Canfield for a very long time. I was the director of training for his organization, and he was an incredible mentor and teacher and friend to me for many years, and still is. We still do some project work together. His book, The Success Principles, is just a foundational piece. So most of my work actually comes from the work I did with Jack. I joke about the fact I think there's only 2 or 3 pieces of my work that are truly original. And between Jack and the other people that I had the opportunity to work with and learn from, a couple of other things kind of bio-related through Jack, I had the opportunity to be a founding member of the Transformational Leadership Council, and then a co-founder of a smaller group, but similar in Southern California, called the Southern California Association of Transformational Leaders, which are both groups that sound just so impressive, don't they? I mean,
Yeah.
but the truth is,
right up there, you're at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people I was the executive director of the Transformational Leadership Council for a period of time, which is by far the most impressive title I've ever had. It was also one of the lowest paying positions I've ever had. So that's
probably hard work too, right?
Yeah, I was working very hard. I was hardly getting paid at all, but I had the best title ever.
Right.
But the truth is, those organizations were both, and still are, opportunities for me to learn from and just be around and be influenced by some of the greatest teachers and trainers and speakers and authors and just thought leaders in the entire world. So they were really great opportunities. And then the other things that I always like to reference, and they're very closely related. One is in 2010, I wrote a book called Manifesting for Non-Gurus, which I'm super proud of. It's still a very important and kind of representational piece of my work. But I've joked with you about this before. I spent 5 years proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Manifesting for Non-Gurus is a clever title, but a horrible, horrible brand. And for me, being out there in the business world, where I know you spend a lot of time, it just didn't work. Organizations and leaders and real difference makers and change makers are really not that interested in manifesting or gurus or anything like that.
Right.
So a couple of years ago, I actually rebranded my work to this concept of excellent decisions that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And it was a total game changer for me. I'm still doing the exact same kind of work that I was doing. I'm still doing transformational coaching and consulting work, working with people on peak performance and leadership and communication skills and creating cultures and things like that. But I now call it something different. I call it excellent decisions, and I have a whole kind of structure around what that means. But the difference was so profound for me, and the opportunities I've had to get in and work with those influencers and leaders and people who can really take the work I do and make a real difference in their own life or in their organization, and therefore the lives of other people, has just changed fundamentally because of that rebranding. So in
Well,
addition to the book, there's now the Excellent Decisions Leadership Program, which is
okay.
kind of the current chapter, if you will.
Well, what I like, Robert, is your this quest of always learning and seeing what you can absorb from other people, and the fact that as you're shamelessly claiming that lots of your work is actually other people's work. That's not unusual, right? I mean, you're out there looking. You have a concept in mind, and then you're absorbing and repackaging and making it your own, making it your process. And so, I'd encourage you just to accept and own the fact that nobody's doing Robert MacPhee the way Robert MacPhee does, right? So you are unique, even though there's a lot of threads of Jack's work and other people's work in there. You are the only excellent decision person, and that's an interesting spin on this.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's part of, again, you and I first connected in that Jack Canfield environment. So one of the things I admire most about Jack is his humility. I mean, the man most people know him for the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Through that whole odyssey where they've now sold over 600 million Chicken Soup for the Soul books, wow. He's incredibly well known. He's also just one of the smartest and wisest, I think, people in that whole environment of speakers and authors and teachers out there in what I call personal and professional development. He's very well respected amongst his peers. He could have an ego, the size of this room. But if he was on this podcast, if he was, he would listen to this podcast to see what he could learn from you and I, two of his students, because that's who he is.
And take notes.
Yeah. And I think it's important in a lot of cases with the really big pieces to attribute, if someone has something that really they've come up with, and there's not that much of it. If you go back and look, there's a pretty clear path all the way centuries and centuries back. The nature of all this, fundamental principles of how to be successful in your life and your business. You can start tracing it, and most of our stuff all comes from the same places. And at the same time, I totally agree with you. We each develop our own unique approach to it. And your approach might resonate really well with one person who just didn't really get it from me. And the opposite could absolutely be true. And that's part of the value. I mean, I feel so committed to doing this work. I see how much better the world can be if more people were aware of the kind of work that you and I are doing and the difference it can make in their lives and in their organizations. Yes. And you and I have had a lot of parenting conversations, and I always told Jack the single biggest impact his work had on my life was as a parent. I feel like I was working with Jack while my kids were growing up, and that's called an unfair advantage, right? I have 3 kids who are doing amazingly well. I call them kids. My oldest, as we record this, I'm leaving tomorrow to go watch her do her PhD presentation to get her doctorate degree. And so they're accomplishing these amazing things, but all 3 of them also live the kind of principles that you and I are sharing with people all the time. They live those principles, I think, even better than I do, and I'm teaching this stuff. So it was an incredible gift to have them grow up around the kind of just conversations that I was in on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And my kids are a little younger than yours, but the same thing. They've been around this. I have pictures of them when I think they're maybe 2 and 4 or 3 and 5 something, with the family, with Uncle Jack, way back when. I remember Jack leaning forward to my son Nathan, who would get up early on a Saturday morning to turn on cartoons before we were aware he was doing it, and sneak an extra hour that way. And Jack leans over and says, "Remember, watch lots of TV. It's good for you." I'm like, no! Just being playful. He had no idea that was an issue for him. Or maybe he did. He seemed to just think he totally tuned in. Yeah, it's really, really fun and interesting. And I think an element I see is, the part of when you teach your children, these principles, if you, so in my case, if I mess up and I'm not, living in that line 100% of the time, you better believe I'm going to hear about it.
Yeah. And I'm the exact same thing has happened to me. I share some of those stories about my kids and them calling me on these principles, because I think, like, I share them in my speeches or my workshops that I do, because I think it's one of the most compelling ways. First of all, it shows my own vulnerability and the fact that I'm not perfect. And they are some of the best examples. And like when I'm working with leaders, we try to be perfect, but we're not. And if as leaders, we have an element of trust and open communication that's in place, where our subordinates will call us on our stuff, just like you're describing our kids do to you and I. To me, if I'm a leader, that's the kind of environment I want to look at and be really proud of creating, that my subordinate would come up to me and say, hey, we have this plaque on the wall that says, we're committed to excellence. Well, I'm seeing a few things that look so excellent, and I'd like to share those with you. That's what I'd want.
Right.
And at the same time, some of those stories with my kids, oh man, it was so humiliating at the time.
You feel better now. You grew out of it.
Yeah, someday I will.
Well, let's move forward into excellent decisions a little bit. And what I'm familiar with Manifesting for Non-Gurus. I remember when you released that book, and I think I have a copy of that and of the journal that accompanied it. And I appreciate the process and going through that exercise, especially from a mindset standpoint. And what's interesting is I totally recognize that no one out there is saying, please, business leaders anyways, please help me to manifest, or please, I'm looking for a non-guru instead of a guru, right? They're not using that language. In fact, Robert, in my world, business transformation, they're not even asking for business transformation, right? They're asking for some specific problem, and can you help me solve the problem? So as you had Manifesting for Non-Gurus, how did you end up with this name, Excellent Decisions? Where does that come from?
Well, I can answer it in two ways. And one of them is really coming from the work that I was already doing. In the book, Manifesting for Non-Gurus, there's a model that I developed. It's one of those pieces that actually is one of the few that I've never seen anyone else teaching it the exact same way, unless they got it from me. And I'm happy to have people, sharing it with other people. To me, that's the highest praise. If they're teaching it the exact same way and calling it the exact same thing and attributing it to themselves, I have a little problem with that. But the model actually starts with results. Like you were talking about, a problem that someone has to solve, something that they want different in their life. And the idea is that the results they're getting are coming from the actions that they're taking. And, kind of goes against the whole manifesting idea, where you'd like to think you could sit on the couch and cross your legs and light enough candles and chant the right mantra and everything would just come, marching to your door. But the model was built on the fact that your results are coming from the actions that you're taking. And where it kind of went to the inner work, that's more kind of in line, I think, with most of the work that I do, was the idea that the actions you are taking are driven by the thoughts and emotions that you're experiencing. So you're thinking a certain way, you're feeling a certain way, and that's what drives the actions you take, which ultimately lead to the results you get. And then the fourth piece of it was that the way we think and the way we feel is either dictated by what I call external influences, the people that we surround ourselves, the environments that we're in, the media, the social media, the advertising, our friends, our family. We're literally, in today's world, we're just bombarded with all these external influences. And for a lot of people, that's what determines the way they think, the way they feel, and therefore the way they act and what shows up in their life. And the piece that I brought in as really what I felt was the biggest game changer was that the other thing that influences the way we think and the way we feel is our beliefs. It's our beliefs about who we are, what I call our self-image. Like, I believe that I'm capable of earning a certain amount of money. I believe I'm a certain level of health and fitness. I believe I deserve to be in a certain kind of relationship. And ultimately, those beliefs determine the way I think, the way I feel, and again, really strongly influence the actions I end up taking and the results that show up in my life. So that whole model was really foundational to everything that I was doing. And the way that the excellent decisions piece came in was I realized that there was no way to get from the way we think and the way we feel to the way we act without making a decision. That was literally the bridge. On the one side of my diagram is the inner work, the beliefs, the habits, the thoughts and emotions that we're experiencing, and waking up to the fact that we have some control over that and we can make choices and make changes, and that's all great. But if people never translate that into action, nothing ever changes. And again, you can't sit on the couch and meditate and change the way you think and expect that your results are going to change unless you make a decision to do something different, to take some different action. So the whole idea of excellent decisions really showed up, fortunately for me, in a model that I was already using, but almost like a missing piece, like identifying that there was a bridge from one area to the other that was critical for people. And ultimately, the decisions that we make and our willingness to make some decision was what put the whole thing into action, what really engaged, the implementation of the ideas so that things really could change in our lives. And then the second part of it was really related to work that I was doing with young people. My own children were high school and college age at the time, and I was doing whatever work I could with young people. And I actually learned that that's not, for me, it wasn't a great business model because I found it really difficult to make money in that environment, but I still shared my work whenever I could with, my own kids' school or other schools that were interested. And what I realized was that our young people today are faced with incredible stress and pressure, like those external influences, the peer pressure, the social pressure, the academic pressure, and in a lot of cases, the parental pressure was so hard for them. And what they weren't getting was clear work in the area of vision and values. So to me, excellent decisions are decisions that are based on vision and values rather than stress and pressure. And it showed up so profoundly, first of all, in this environment with our young people, because they have so much stress and pressure, and it's so obvious. Again, peer pressure, social pressure, academic pressure, and parental pressure. And then the consequences, like for me as a parent, the consequences were so crazy, because if they were being driven by all these external influences, to me, this was what leads to things like kids doing drugs and drinking too much and sexual assault and bullying. And even as far as suicide, we look at the suicide rates of our young people because they're being pushed and pushed and pushed, and it's never enough. And they don't have a really strong sense of vision and values. And at the same time, again, we talked about my kids and my unfair advantage. I saw my kids going off to really great schools, which I was super proud of, but I was also a little scared by, because the good news, my youngest daughter went to Stanford, which is great, right? It's incredible. It's so hard to get in. But the bad news is you've got to compete with all the other kids that got into Stanford.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's incredible how much stress and pressure they're under in those environments. And I saw my own children thriving. I call thriving, achieving at a really high level, but also being really happy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were experiencing that. They were doing great things. I could go to the cocktail party and brag about my kids and all the great things they were doing. But in the back of my mind, what I was most proud of was who they are. Like, not what they're doing, what they're accomplishing, but who they are as people. And that they do have a level of clarity and awareness of their vision and their values and what's important. So like my oldest daughter went to Dartmouth, and about a month after she went to Dartmouth, an article came out in Rolling Stone magazine about the fraternity culture at Dartmouth. And it was horrible. It was drinking, it was drugs, it was, doping the drink and people passing out and getting assaulted. And it was just this horrible, horrible thing.
Like, oh
and
man, what have I done?
I'm in California, my daughter's 3,000 miles away, and I'm reading this article. But when I really thought about it, I said, you know what? My daughter's really smart. And I don't mean academically smart. I mean like life smart. And my daughter will probably go to parties at fraternities. because that's what they do at Dartmouth. That's part of the experience. But she will not go alone, and she will not take a drink from a stranger. And, you know, she'll always have somebody who has her back, you know, and so as a parent, I was okay with that, because again, she had that grounding of vision and values and knowing what's important. And she was smart enough to act based on that, rather than the peer pressure. Oh, here, drink this, or here, we're going to go there, or here, you know, hang out with this person, whatever. She would just say, no. So again, that's how kind of the definition of excellent decisions as decisions based on vision and values versus stress and pressure started. And now it's everything I do, whether it's organizational or working with individuals. It just keeps zeroing in on that idea of clarity about vision and values, and having that be what drives the way we think, the way we feel, the decisions we make, and the actions we take.
So it sounds like, Robert, an excellent decision has the vision and values guiding you as your filter sometimes, as I've described it before. You know, what's the filter by which you're making choices or decisions, or, you know, evaluating criteria? What would a not excellent decision be based on?
Well, a not excellent decision, by my definition, would be one that's driven by that external stress and pressure. So, for instance, in a work environment, you know, an organization might have a tremendous amount of stress and pressure to make money for their shareholders in the short run. And they might also have a vision and values statement hanging on their wall about their commitment to their clients or their customers and providing the best possible service. And at some point, it's very likely that they're going to have to make a decision, that they're going to make a choice about whatever their fee structure or their implementation of their work, or some follow-up on an issue, or how to handle something that didn't go the way they wanted it to go, whatever. I mean, crazy things happen in life and business, and they're going to have to make a decision that's either going to be based on that external influence to make as much money as they possibly can in the short run, versus their vision and their values of being a company that really cares about their people, that really cares about their clients, that really cares about their community. You know, when we do the vision and values work, these are the kinds of things that come up. And making money is part of it. Like, for an organization with high and lofty vision and values, but not a commitment to making money, chances are they're not going to be around very long, right, in order to fulfill those, you know, the vision in alignment with the values. So, not to take anything away from the importance of making a profit in business, I believe, in fact, I love Jim Rohn's quote that more money makes us more of who we really are. Mm-hmm. And in business, that means that if we're really clear about our vision and our values, you know, our sense of purpose, you know, purpose to me comes from vision and values. If someone has a really clear vision that's in alignment with their values, to me, that defines their purpose. And if organizations have that, and that's what's driving their day-to-day decisions, like what they decide and the actions they take, what they do and how they do it, mm-hmm, there's actually a lot of really good science out there that documents that those companies can be. They're not choosing between that and profitability. Especially in the long run, they're more profitable and more sustainable. Have you seen Raj Sisodia's Firms of Endearment book?
No, I have not.
It's a really great book that actually documents a whole series of companies that have a commitment. He's also the co-author of a book called Conscious Capitalism. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you and I have talked about that before with your conscious leadership approach. And the idea is to take a really conscious approach to business, and the Firms of Endearment book measures firms that do that. And what they see is that companies are more profitable, and to me, like, even more importantly, they're sustainable. You know, this whole thing about how much money can I make for my shareholders as fast as possible, it looks good in the short run, but it's like driving your car at red line. You know, you might be going fast for a while, but at some point, to me, it's just not always sustainable.
That's a concept that we often point out to leaders that they're using too much brute force and they're relying on brute force to get them through to whatever their result is, rather than having the systems and processes in place that will carry them there. What you just described, I think about how do you put a dollar amount, a value, a numeric financial value on having an attitude of gratitude, right? And yet there is some research out there of your gratitude actually moving the needle for you in all of those environmental things that support the results coming.
Right.
We talked about being centered or grounded a little while ago, like your daughter having that grounding, even though she was at Dartmouth in this crazy animal house environment. That being centered and grounded creates this platform for which you can then make, in your language, better decisions. In the financial world of a company, if everyone was grounded as opposed to haphazardly following the whim of the moment, it sums up to be better results, right? So I think there's a lot to what you're saying here.
Well, and there's a really powerful connection between the concept of gratitude that you were talking about and money. Because, and people, I think of them as two separate things. Gratitude is this woo-woo magical thinking, yeah, that sounds good, but we're here to make money kind of thing. But someone taught me at one point that all money is an expression of gratitude. If you really think about it, the money that someone will pay for anything is an expression of their gratitude and appreciation for what they feel like they're receiving in return. So there's a reason why someone will go to a fancy steakhouse and spend hundreds of dollars on a wonderful meal and a beautiful bottle of wine,
right?
And they'll go to a fast food place and spend $5. It's the level of gratitude and appreciation. It's the experience that they have and the feelings and emotions that are created around it. So not only are there not two separate things with gratitude and money, but they're very closely related. And I think the other way that it shows up is in terms of teams. And the things that I've seen teams of people, the things that I've seen frontline people do because they really feel appreciated are so far and beyond what people will do just for money. Like if someone's just there for the paycheck, they will do the bare minimum and they will get paid and they will do what they're there to do. And then they'll punch their clock and they'll go home. But organizations that create a culture and have leaders who truly and genuinely appreciate the people who are doing the work that makes the whole company's mission possible and let them know that on a consistent basis, even if they're not getting paid as much money. And again, there's all sorts of examples of people who go above and beyond for something bigger and more important, what people really want. And we live in a society where most people are just underappreciated. We feel like, I think it was actually Jack who used to say, people go around with a big sign on their forehead that says, appreciate me.
Yeah.
And you and I have both experienced exercises and activities which are just all about milling around a room and expressing gratitude and appreciation to people and seeing the way they respond.
Oh, it fills you right up.
It's profound. It's like we're empty and we just need to be filled up. Our tanks are on empty in that regard. So,
on the employees being appreciated and how far they'll go, I've seen examples on projects that I've been with at clients where the interactions with hourly paid team members went home and came back the next day and worked on something on their own time at home, after dinner or whatever, for probably 2 or 3 hours and came back with something the next morning and said, look, I created this last night. That's not without an expectation to get any pay for that, because, they swipe their time card, at work in the morning when they come in, and then in the evening when they go home. They did this on their own, and I've got multiple examples of that. And that comes from the environment and setting up their sense of not just you appreciating them, but their sense of, I'm excited about what I'm working on, and this is I can contribute and I'm being appreciated for my contribution. So
Yeah,
there's examples all over the place for this. So,
for sure, for sure.
let's talk about business leaders, and this could be in a big company in the corporate world, could be of a small business owner, maybe somebody who's got 50 or 100 employees, or even just a 10-person office. Business leaders have challenges. So what are some of the more common challenges that you see a business leader having?
Well, thank goodness they have challenges, right, Pete? Or you and I'd be out of business. No, I totally agree with you, and it is really challenging, I think, in today's world to be in a leadership position. To me, it goes back to those external influences that leaders are faced with. We talked about young people with peer pressure and social pressure and academic pressure. Well, for leaders, that short-term profitability, the demands of the shareholders, the world we live in as far as, regulation and having to follow all the rules and dot all the I's and cross all the T's, in addition to just, trying to get your organization to run the way that you want it to run and accomplish what you want it to accomplish. There are so many of those external influences that leaders today are faced with. I think the other thing about leaders, as it relates to excellent decisions, and I call it my excellent decisions work a leadership program. And sometimes people say, well, I'm not really a leader. And I say, well, by my definition, you either are or you can be, because I believe if someone is making decisions based on their vision and values versus making decisions based on the external stress and pressure, or whatever that is, then they are by definition a leader. Right. And sometimes the person on the front lines who has no authority over other people, in my mind, is a more powerful example of being a leader, depending on how they do what they do, than a manager or a supervisor who's just in the business of telling people what to do. So, that person, again, who's just telling people what to do, that's not what I would call a very vision and values focused approach. It's just like the old kind of masculine command and control. You'll, fatherly, if you will, you'll do it that way because I said you'll do it that way, and I'm the boss and I'm in charge. Versus someone who goes back to the vision and the values of the organization, and this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it, and is everyone on board? And sometimes there's not always time for that, but sometimes there is time for it. And again, to me, someone who is consistently coming from a place of making decisions and taking actions that are driven by their vision and values, even if they don't have anyone following them now, in my opinion, it's just a matter of time before they do, because that's the kind of people that other people want to follow, and that other guy or that other person, not necessarily a guy, I guess, more likely to be a guy probably, but that old style, you'll do it that way because I said you'll do it that way. Mm-hmm. As soon as the opportunity is available, the person they're leading is out of there. We don't, millennials get such a bad name now for not staying in their jobs. They don't have any commitment, they don't stick around, all that. And I look at it completely differently. I think if an organization is complaining that they can't get millennials to stick around, they should look in the mirror and they should look at their leadership and they should look at their culture. And I think what they'll find is that they're not being driven by a sense of mission and vision and purpose and values. Because if they were, the millennials, the younger people now who do have the flexibility, they're incredibly, gifted and talented and skilled, and they can move. Like, they don't need to hang around here. They're not sticking around for a pension because there aren't any pensions anymore. So they can move. And if we don't create an environment where they feel like, again, gratitude, connected to purpose, making a difference, being appreciated, if they're not feeling that, why wouldn't they move on? That's what we human beings really want more of. Right. And to be included. And absolutely. Let me throw some scenarios at you. There's a lot of, all of the different challenges that are out there in the world. Let's pretend that
you're the CEO of a billion-dollar company, and your revenue's down, so your sales are down, and now your costs are too high relative to what your sales were. Now their sales are lower, and you're like, what do I do? Do I lay people off? So there's a decision in front of them. How do they make that choice?
Well, if I'm understanding your question, like how would someone who's making excellent decisions make that choice, would be to make that choice again based on vision and values. And in that particular scenario, I would say that there's like two levels of the decision. One is the decision about whether we need to do this. Like, is this the right move? That's one level of the decision. And like you said, in organizations, even the most conscious organizations, there comes a time where you look at the revenue and you look at the expenses and you have to make some really hard decisions. And one of those decisions, it might get to the point, I think most truly conscious companies would wait as long as they possibly could to make that choice and say, we got to let some of our people go. Because truly conscious people or organizations care so much about their people. Like, that is the last thing that they would want to do. But you know what the truth is? To be sustainable, to make it work, to stay in business, sometimes it gets to that point. I actually read a case study about Whole Foods recently that was similar to this. Like, you can imagine an organization like Whole Foods, that would be the last thing they would want to do. But there was a point in the economy, there was a point with their competition, there was a point with, whatever area of the country, whatever it was, where they had to look and say, we're going to have to let some people go.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is the first level of the conversation. But the second level, I believe, is even more important, is not what you have to do, but how you're going to do it. And if you just send the notices out by email and tell people they have 24 hours to get out the door, that's one way to do it.
Right.
And this case study with Whole Foods was a whole nother way. Like, they literally went to the teams and the team leadership and said, look, here's our situation. Here's what we need to do. Help us figure out what's the best way to do this. They ended up having some of the employees who were going to stay cut back their hours so they didn't have to let as many people go. And they had some people who were working from home to save money. And they had all these creative ideas that came from a collaborative process about how to do it and get the end result. Like you said, at some point they had to cut costs, and this was an area that they had to look at. So that was what they did, but how they did it was what maintained the culture and created an environment. And I'm sure not for everybody. I'm sure as part of that process, there were some people who had to be let go, and they had families, and all those kinds of things that happen. But someone who's making excellent decisions, someone who's, again, got that clarity of vision and values and is committed to making decisions and taking actions that are driven by the vision and values and purpose of the organization and the leadership, to me, that's how they would make a decision like that.
I love that example, because in that Whole Foods example, you do get to a place where it's not an individual stressing at their desk, making a decision in a vacuum,
right?
That impacts thousands of people. I mean, it's like, hey, folks, we have this issue. Here's the problem. Clear problem statement. Here's where we need to get to. Let's talk about the paths. What are the options? And there's a lot of people who just chop, and not care much about the rest of it. But in order to uphold what's most important to them, they took an approach, and I love your how question. They took an approach that defined a way to get the solution to the problem that they had. That at least
they had also done. Yeah, and they had also done a tremendous amount of work leading up to that point to build the culture where that conversation could happen. Mm-hmm. I'm actually working with a company right now on their customer service division, and they're growing so fast that they're actually opening up, they're in Southern California, but they're opening up a customer service location in a less glamorous location, I'll just say, than Southern California, to do some of their customer service work. And they're managing how to have that conversation, how to let the people know that are currently in beautiful, sunny Southern California that there's an opportunity for some of them to potentially relocate. Mm-hmm. And part of their commitment is not to let anyone go. So they're going into this whole conversation with a commitment not to let anyone go. but it's a good, smart business decision to reduce their costs and have some of their customer service work done in an environment where it's far less expensive, and they don't have to pay people as much to give them the same quality of life. That's all. It makes perfect sense. But the way they're doing it and the foundation that they've already built to enable that conversation just makes it so much easier than, if the company is just, cutting people and then bringing people back, and, we'll let people go whenever we need to, and we don't really care. It's just the bottom line. It's just a whole different approach.
Yeah, and I love how that illustrates, because, unfortunately, a lot of the clients that we work with, they are at some point, sometimes before we're called in, and other times it's after, they get to a point of, hey, the problem is way bigger than we thought. We think we need to end up doing a giant layoff. And, ideally, we would love to have them not do that, but at the same time, you want the company to survive, and you don't want to put the whole company at risk because of what was probably 5 or 10 years prior to that of not so excellent decisions that led them into the place where they are. Or frankly, it could be other things like economic conditions do change, et cetera. A new competitor comes up out of nowhere. It's like the Ubers versus the taxis. The taxis didn't
Right.
have Uber coming. All of a sudden they've got this new dynamic. So the taxi companies have to deal with that, and chances are they're smaller than they were as a result. So and then you have to compete on a new dimension. Can you offer higher levels of service or whatever? So Uber's a wonderful example of the technology changing right underneath your feet. How do you still survive if you're a taxi company? So
Right. And I think all these examples are really good reminders of the importance and value of doing this kind of vision and values clarification work when it's not a crisis.
mhm.
Because if you do have, if you are a taxi cab company and all of a sudden you're faced with Uber and you haven't done the work and you haven't built a culture and you don't have clear vision and values and don't have effective communication, and you've got to deal with that circumstance, that situation, without having the firm foundation built. To me, and it's true for individuals and organizations, like the worst time to try and really get clear about your vision and values is when you're in a crisis, when you have to make a decision right now. You have, a lot of that external stress and pressure. And the opposite is true. If people have already done the work, if I'm running a taxi cab company and Uber comes along and I've already done the work and I have great communication with my drivers and I take really good care of them and I make sure they know how much they're appreciated and all those kinds of things, if nothing else, I'm going to be the cab company that is best set up to thrive, while the other cab companies that don't care about their people, just fall to the wayside because
Right.
their people go or whatever happens.
Right. And if you're a cab company that happens to have a whole lot of vans as opposed to small sedans, then it just so happens to be timing when Amazon is announcing they're looking to outsource their delivery services. And now you have a potential service line for the taxi company. I don't know. I just made that up on the fly, but
Well, no, but it's a great example, because if you're in that space of clarity about your vision and values and you don't have to freak out when Uber comes along, you're still open to those other possibilities. Whereas if I'm freaking out and I'm in crisis mode, even if I had a whole bunch of vans right next door, I'm so stressed out, I don't even see that possibility. Our mind is not open to the new ideas and insights that are available to us if we're just so, crazy, stressed out, and day-to-day overwhelmed, just trying to keep up and make it through the day. It's not going to happen.
yeah, it's back to that centered and groundedness, that if you are confident in who you are and have a couple core beliefs like things are happening and I can handle anything that comes along, and I trust my team, and those sorts of things are enablers as opposed to things that get in your way.
Exactly.
So let me throw one more scenario at you, which unfortunately is very real for a lot of business leaders. So let's say that you have a business leader who is working incredibly long hours. They're super stressed at work. They also have worked so many hours at work that they've started to lose their connection at home with their spouse and with their family. And they're like, oh man, I don't find joy at home. I don't find joy at work. Should I get a divorce? Should I make some other life changes? How do you guide that person to make excellent decisions?
Well, on the one hand, I think, again, it all comes back to that conversation about vision and values, and a situation, a circumstance like that is going to be, first of all, I think a person is a lot less likely to find themselves in a situation like that, at least to the extreme that you're talking about. Like I noticed, like when you got to the point in your question, you said, well, should they be considering getting a divorce? I was like, like skip a breath. Because isn't it a shame that a situation like that would get so far that would be the thinking? And I think on the one hand, again, people who do the vision and values work before it's a crisis are really going to benefit. And at the same time, hopefully, they're going to be in a position to make a decision, even if it does go that far. Like gosh, like it's hard for me to imagine taking it that far. Like literally in my own experience, I mean, I've been married for 30 years. We've, nothing's perfect, but, to think that situations with work would get to that point where you would literally be thinking about choosing your business versus your relationship. The biggest shame in even considering that possibility is like, how did we let it get that far?
Yeah.
So I guess, and it's almost, I don't want to dodge the question, but it's almost like it's impossible to look at through the lens of making excellent decisions, because if you were truly making excellent decisions, it would never get to that point. So I guess on some level, it's like the question is like, if no one ever heard about the kind of work that you and I do, and they're listening to this podcast, but their life really is at that point, I guess the real answer to the question is to start with looking at your vision and values. Like if someone is never invited into this conversation about having a sense of vision and values and purpose, as crazy as it is, now would be the perfect time to take a day off from whatever that crazy business is that you're running, and take a day away from home and away from the office, and take a journal and spend some time asking yourself questions about what's really important to you. And, if your business is about making more money, how important is that to you? If your business is about making a contribution to solving some big problem in the world, how important is that to you? If your relationship, has been together for so many years, how important is that to you? What's working? What's not working? I mean, I have a whole process that I take people through with this excellent decisions idea that starts with awareness about, making change and what's involved, and taking personal responsibility and why that's so important. And then clarifying where you're at now and what your vision and your values and your value are, and then letting go of attachments and getting into action. There's this whole long process. And even for someone who got themselves to that point of crisis that you're describing, I mean, it almost seems naive, but my first suggestion to that person would be to take whatever time you can. If it's a day, take a day. If it's only an hour, take an hour, but get yourself some sort of clarity, because that person's situation sounds very much to me like the external influences, the stress, the pressure has been driving their life. And that's what's gotten them to this point of things are not working. And to whatever degree they could have more clarity about vision and values would be the degree to, and maybe if it's gotten that far, there's not going to be any great choices. Maybe there's going to be something that suffers relationship wise or business wise. I don't know. But if it was a friend of mine, I would want to help them as much as possible that whatever decisions they were making were based on what's really important to them, not what someone else thinks should be important to them.
I really like the answer. And, it is unfortunate that there's people I know out there in the world who have ended up in divorce, right? For a variety of reasons. And, part of your answer was, well, put these processes in place before it even gets there, right? I mean, that's really the best case scenario, so that you don't end up Because once you're in that scenario, it's the cumulative effect of a lot of years of things, and maybe not being clear, not being aligned. If you have the clarity and you have the alignment, then the rest of it becomes easier, is really what I'm hearing as one of your main themes or one of your points. It's easy to make good choices when that's the case. So,
well, and it's a stereotypical kind of question for a reason. And I think we all know people in our lives who are so focused on their business and making more money and acquiring more stuff that they're missing out on things that if we really asked them what was important to them, they would probably say is more important to them in terms of relationships and family and making a difference in the world and having a sense of contribution and those kinds of things. If you really do the work, and again, making money is an important part of that. More money will make us more of who we really are. If I want to solve world hunger, the more money I have behind me, the better I'm going to be able to do with that. No question. It's part of the equation. But to just work, and make more money and have nicer cars and bigger houses and more houses. And, those are the people who at the end of the rat race, they're still a rat,
yeah. They have a tail and pointy ears. So.
Yeah, and they're not happy. Again, happiness. Did we talk about this or on this podcast or the?
So I brought up the definition of happiness, and you shared this before. This is one that you grabbed, and the essence of it, of having joy in the pursuit of your potential and your excellence.
Of your potential, yeah. The ancient Greek definition of happiness is the experience of joy while in pursuit of your potential. And again, the pursuit of your potential and growing your business and making more money, I have nothing against that. I think it's fabulous. I just want to make sure that people are doing it in the pursuit of their potential, what's important to them. Because if you wake up at the end of the day and you've got the nicest house on the block and the nicest car on the block and, the most money in the bank, but you're miserable and your kids hate you, what's the point? What did you do wrong?
You missed.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic conversation. And I, nothing like throwing a couple zingers at you
thanks for the curveball
there. But what it illustrates, Robert, to me, and I think to the people listening, who are business leaders, who have some role either in big companies or small companies or even solopreneurs are listening to this. And I'm not sure that they're necessarily faced with, oh my God, is my life so bad I need a divorce or whatever, but they do have choices and challenges that they have to navigate. And, do I lay people off? I mean, that's a real one that a lot of companies have to deal with. And a version of the do I lay people off is I have an underperforming individual. How do I get this person to perform? Do I fire them? Do I, suspend them? Do I, how do I handle that? And your message is about your vision and values and being aligned and making deliberate choices. The image that came to me early on in our conversation was versus being a little silver ball inside the pinball machine, getting knocked all over the place by the external conditions of life.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Versus saying, I want to go in that, the extra 1,000-point bonus, go straight there, in the pinball machine. So anyway, as way to wrap up this conversation, I appreciate there's a consistency to the theme of how you answered all of these, and that consistency, I hope people who are listening, as you're listening to this, you reflect on your current challenges, your situations, and put it through this structure that Robert's shown us so far about making excellent decisions. And I encourage you to reach out and learn more if you want. So Robert, how can people do that?
Yeah, I do answer all the questions the same way. You notice that, but at the same time, it's different, and it's different because everyone's vision and values is different.
Yes.
So I do, I think it was Stephen Covey who said who is good with a hammer thinks everything is a nail. And that's like me with excellent decisions. It all seems to come back to vision and values. But to me, the beauty of it is it's not for you and me to tell our clients what their vision and values should be and give them a list and, have them implement it. It's up to them. And everyone's vision and values really are different. And as far as getting in touch with me, very simple. I'm not someone who has 27 gatekeepers. Again, I did this rebranding thing. The website is excellentdecisions.com, which I was thrilled was still available after I waited so long to do it. But you can find me there. You can email me from there or find the phone number there. And happy to support people in whatever way I can to learn more about our approach and what we're up to. Excellentdecisions.com.
Excellentdecisions.com, where you can meet my excellent friend, Robert MacPhee. Thank you, Robert, so much for today. And everyone listening, we'll be back again with another episode shortly. Take care, everyone. Hey, Pete here again. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. And I invite you to come back. Come back to this video channel or go to the podcast channel for Business Results Radio. Check it out, subscribe, give a 5-star review, and go ahead and share it with your friends. Until then, we'll see you again.